Welcome back, everyone. We are at the Progressive Victory Hype House here in Ohio, getting voters registered and talking to elected officials and people running for office. We're now going to talk to a already elected official, but he's running for re-election here in Ohio. Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dani Isaacson, state representative for District 24 here in Cincinnati.
So what's motivating you to run for office again?
There's a lot more to do. So I have been incredibly grateful. I have loved the job. Even serving as a Democrat in a Republican legislature, every day has felt like there's a way to find an impact and to make an impact. And so, I want to continue that work, but in part because things take a long time to move through the legislature. Right? Like, yes, we got historic increases in public school funding, but there's a lot more money that our public school system needs and a lot more investment, a lot more improvement, and that's going to take years. Like, yes, we're making some progress in the discussion on reducing the property tax burden for low-income seniors, but that problem is going to take a long time to work on, and we have so much more work to do on childcare, on youth mental health issues. There's just, the list goes on, and the legislature moves slowly, and so it takes multiple sessions to not just introduce new ideas, but actually see them to fruition, particularly when you're not the party in power.
What made you run for office originally?
So my background is as an organizer, a community organizer, which is why I'm so excited about this weekend's events and people being out, knocking doors, canvassing. And I then ran a community engagement organization focused on lifting up the voices of what we call the everyday experts. Kids getting bullied in school, people riding the bus, seniors struggling to pay the rent, and getting them in rooms with policymakers to really have everyday expertise and their ideas and their solutions shape what's happening at the local level. And you spend a few hundred evenings, like I did, listening to those ideas, and you kind of realize on most issues, not all, but on most issues, when people describe what would make a big difference in their day-to-day life, their ideas for that solution are not obviously partisan. They don't fall into a lane, right, that you can sort of place within the national narrative. And so it made me feel like even in a state like Ohio, where the legislature is so skewed because of gerrymandering, maybe there's room to really make some progress. So that's why I decided to run.
So most people know you in the country probably from one story, and it's from a piece of legislation that you and the House Speaker introduced. It was bipartisan. The House Speaker is a Republican. That would give cash incentives to families and students for school attendance, and that got a big reaction on Fox News, a big reaction on conservative radio, a lot of strong conversations about it. Why did you introduce this piece of legislation, and how did you react, or how did you see the reaction to it online and on TV?
Oh, thank you for the question. And just one quick point of clarification: it was the House Majority Leader, yes, not the House Speaker.
But yes.
So I don't want to put the House Speaker out there on
House Speaker on state level.
But the basic idea came from the challenge that we're facing. Right, we have an acute issue as a result of the pandemic and remote learning. All over the world, not just the United States, we've seen a spike in chronic absenteeism. So the amount of time students are spending, or the chronic absenteeism is when a student is missing more than 10% of the school days, right? And so that's the sort of accepted metric for when we have a problem. Just to give you an example, here in Ohio, on the eve of the pandemic, right before it started, 11% of kindergartners were chronically absent, and about 15% of ninth graders, right? Two seminal years in education. Today, statewide, it's 29% for kindergartners and 32% for ninth graders. And in urban and rural districts that are some of the lowest income districts that have had the hardest time bouncing back from the pandemic, we're talking about chronic absenteeism numbers in the 40s and 50s.
Wow.
50% of students in some districts are chronically absent today. So we have a new problem, right? This problem existed in a different way in 2019 and before. And so we need some new ideas to jolt us back into getting kids in the classroom, not only in the classroom, but dealing with low graduation rates in some districts. So when you look at what has worked, what the evidence shows, what the data shows across not just the United States and different cities, but in different parts of the world, conditional cash transfers as it relates to academics, so in this case, cash transfers, cash incentives to boost attendance, the data shows they are effective. So the idea here is, if that's effective, let's test it here in Ohio with a really small pilot program. I like to emphasize that it is a very modest pilot program. In a $10 billion education budget, we're talking about a $1.5 million pilot over 2 years. Half of it would test whether you can use it to boost attendance, And again, for the kindergartners, the money is not going to the kindergartner, right? The money is going to their parent or guardian, and it's $50 a month. And for the 9th grader, it would go jointly to the parent or parent or guardian or the student. And then the other half of the pilot is really testing whether in districts with low graduation rates, particularly in urban and rural districts, $250 for every senior upon graduation would change the culture of graduation, with bonuses of $250 for 3.0 GPAs and 3.5 GPAs. So we know it works elsewhere. We know we have a huge problem. Let's find out if it can work in Ohio. And if it works, we're actually, and this is I think the important thing when we think about policy, we are going to save money. Right? It is more expensive to have kids not attending school.
That's what I want to ask you about, because the critiques I was trying to read, I was trying to understand the critiques, and it seems like a lot of them are just calling it silly on its face.
Sure.
But it seemed to be aimed in the fiscal area. Like, how could Ohio, during this period in its economic history, pay for such a program?
So I'm trying to get policymakers in general to kind of rethink how we structure our approach, because I want us to move towards preventative measures, upfront investments, right, upstream. The easiest comparison is to healthcare. Right now, we spend so much money and so many resources and energy dealing with diseases once they come about, right? So let's just take diabetes, right? Once you have onset of chronic diabetes, it's very expensive to deal with and address, and of course we should. But wouldn't it be better as a system to invest money and resources in helping people eat better, get more exercise, right? It costs money to do those things and to have access to nutritious foods. But certainly that's better as an approach than dealing with the absence of those things once you have the onset of chronic disease. Certainly it's better for the system and cheaper to incentivize kids to go to kindergarten, go to 9th grade, attend school, graduate high school, than it is to pay for when you have a workforce in a population because they don't have high school diplomas. Not to mention how expensive it is when kids get in trouble when they're out of school. Right? To put someone through the juvenile detention system in 1 year in Ohio is around $150,000 a year. So think about how many students, if you incentivize that school to attend and they stayed out of trouble that day, just one student staying out of trouble saves you $150,000 potentially. So there's just, the numbers actually make sense if it works. Well, that's why it's a pilot. Let's see if it works.
I was curious about the dollar amount. Where did you come up with $50 for parents for of kindergartners? Why not $100? Why not $300?
So it's an art, not a science on that front, and that's why we're testing it. And we're testing different cadences of delivery. Right? Is $25 biweekly better than $150 quarterly, or a lump sum of $500? But that came from the qualitative side. I spend a ton of time in classrooms and in schools, talking to students, trying to learn from them, listen to them, and so I workshopped it with them. And I asked them about $25, and I gauged their reaction. I asked them about $50. I asked them about $100.
Would these be the everyday experts you were referring to?
Exactly right. Trying to bring that same ethos to the work I'm doing in the legislature.
Gotcha. And this is bipartisan, which I'm fascinated by because I feel like it's the only way to get anything done. So how did you get a colleague from across the aisle, and none other than the House Majority Leader of all people, to work with you on this? Like, how do you bridge that gap? How did you do that? Because it seems like a lot of our leaders seem to stay in their silos and not able to accomplish what you did, even which is proposing an idea like this together.
So it's a great question. I am pretty laser focused on how do I try and get something done for the people who live in this district. This district needs support and needs better state policies. So that's my job. I need to deliver for people who live here, and they've got a lot of needs. The people in charge of the legislature are the Republicans. So if I want to get a bill through the legislature ultimately, it probably needs, at the moment, a Republican joint sponsor. So my job, truly my job, is to build relationships, build trust with different Republicans and identify the issues that we agree on and have enough trust with one another that we're willing to work on them, right? I don't agree with the House Majority Leader on a ton of stuff, but I know him to be someone, because we've built a relationship, who's willing to look at the data, identify a problem, and he's willing to let you make the argument. And if you can convince him, he'll support you. And if you can't convince him, he's going to tell you you're an idiot. And that's his personality. And he's been doing it a long time. And he knows who he is. And he's comfortable in his own skin. And this was an issue where he said, the data's there. It's clearly a problem. let's run a pilot and see if it works.
Due to a lot of the some of the Fox News attention, more right-wing radio attention, has he backed off at all? Does he still stand on the law? Is he still standing by it?
To his credit, he's all in. He has. Look, it shouldn't be as controversial as it is. It's a $1.5 million pilot in a $10 billion budget, right? And if it works, it would be dealing with what is one of, if not the most pressing problem in public education today, right? And so what I say to some of the legislators who give me a hard time about it is, show me the bill you introduced that would address chronic absenteeism, and then we can have a debate. But there hasn't been one, and people are ignoring the problem. And so I'm actually grateful to Fox and whoever else, because this is the discussion we should be having. Love or hate this bill or this idea, we should be talking about getting kids back in school and graduating, not where they go to the bathroom. And so I'm actually grateful that this is the debate we're having.